Hello and welcome to episode 79 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. I'm Patrick Stemp, and with me as always I have Michael Ronn and John L. Monk. How are you guys doing?
Hey, Patrick.
Awesome.
Having a good week?
Yeah.
And this week we're joined by guest author MrHghowell. That's Jeff. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. So we're going to talk to Jeff tonight, a little bit about him as a reader and a little bit as an author, and talk about his book, The Spark. And as usual, we will start with a weekly roundtable, talk about what we've been reading recently. And would you like to go first, Jeff?
Yeah, sure. Currently, I'm actually reading two books. I just started reading Araminta Station by Jack Vance. Not too far into it, but really loving his detail into the possible future that we have. And I'm also reading Charles Dickens collections on the side of that as well. Just started A Tale of Two Cities, and just recently finished A Christmas Carol.
Okay. Yeah, I just got like a collection of the. Those are so easy to get that stuff for free these days.
Yeah.
I think I got all the Sherlock Holmes books for $1. Charles Dickens was free. I just filled up my Kindle with a
stocked
bunch
up
of stuff.
on all those great authors from the past through Kohl's when we were living in Niagara. They just put them all on sale for $5, and my wife and I would just stock up and stockpile on all these great classic literature. And I just decided it's about time to start going through them, and I'm really finding Dickens to be probably my new all-time favorite author.
Cool. I think I grabbed the collection specifically for the Pickwick Papers. I can't remember why. I think maybe because it was the first. Maybe it was like the first ever serialized fiction, if I remember correctly. Maybe that's why.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the Pickwick Chronicles yet. I haven't picked that one up, but so far, yeah, it's amazing. And then reading a little bit about his history as well, and the way he wanted to really be socially progressive in that time period is fantastic, and it really comes through in his work, knowing that about him, and I really, really appreciate that, and it's something that is even true to today.
And Michael, sorry, I think you were going to ask which was his favorite Dickens.
Yeah.
So far, I'm going to have to say A Christmas Carol. Christmas is a really big holiday in my family. When I was in high school, I actually played Ebenezer Scrooge at Clark Road Secondary School here in London. But there's one scene actually reading the book that it was completely profound, and it's during his visit with the second ghost, and the way Dickens talks about all these Victorian families just, no lights being on at home because everyone's out to go visit family it just really struck me as so powerful, because you really lost sight of that, and this is going back into the 1800s, and the beware of consumerism and capitalism during the holidays, and we're still battling capitalism during Christmas, and lost sight of the touch of family during the holidays, and the way he worded it was just so poetic and so beautiful that it just made the story that much more important to me.
Cool. Okay, that's great. And is that your recent reading?
Yeah, I just like I said, I just finished reading that before picking up Tale of Two Cities, and when the play we did in high school was the script was based largely off of the actual text itself, but a lot of the nuances were obviously cut out for the purposes of the script. You weren't getting all the scene descriptions and little asides that he interjects into the narrative itself, and it's something that I think every adaptation has been missing. It's really missing the soul of the story, in my opinion.
Okay. So then I'll go left to right on my screen, and that puts John next. What you been reading this week?
Well, I actually have finally read, it's been on my TBR forever, Russell Blake's Jet. It's a story about an Israeli assassin, black ops kind of lady who sort of leaves that life and tries to, I don't do that anymore, that kind of thing. And then she goes off and, tries to sort of leave that world, but they drag her back in,
I knew you were going to say that. You didn't do it with the Pacino voice, though.
Yeah, I can't do that. Can't do it. But you know what? I mean, here's the thing. So, like, every story's been told. We all get it, but that's okay. It hit all the buttons that I needed to be hit for last week. It's like a puzzle piece. It just sort of it fit in me. I needed that book. I loved it. I thought it was great. So I was going through my Kindle, trying to like find a book because I didn't want to buy anything right now because it's Christmas and everything like that. Because of that, Christmas capitalism he was talking about. I wasn't seeing anything that was sort of fitting. And then I was like, well, like I kind of know Russell a tiny bit. I like his author myths series of articles on his blog. He's got some funny Facebook posts. He barely knows who I am or anything like that. But I always had this sort of like I want him to be like a great author, and so I was afraid to kind of read his book. So I read his book, and sure enough, he's a really good author. I mean, why not? I mean, that's why he's what do you call it? Co-authoring with Clive Cussler. I mean, you're not going to get that if you're not a good writer, and he is. So, real quick, his writing, it's like maybe every 5 chapters I had to look up a word, that kind of thing. It's the turns of phrase are really nice. It's has some really clever, incredible plot twists. And what else? The research. Like I've always wanted to write a thriller, but like the research kills me. So I wrote that Thief book, and that was a lot of research. So I'm like looking at this, and he's talking about all these places in the world, and all these guns, and all these cool, like chemicals and neoprene this and stuff like that. And I was thinking, like, how do you kind of do that to sort of research and write a believable story? So in that respect, I found myself a little bit in awe, like author awe, So it was really well edited. It's like a big thing with me and indie authors because as an indie author, we have to sort of we're always on the spot. The spotlight is always on us. We can't screw up editing or cover design or pretty much anything without people turning around and saying, well, yeah, that's why you're an indie author. So guys like Russell, Howell, and things like that, they're sort of like the standard bearers, and they go forward. And I'm glad to see that Russell was everything that, his sales seemed to make him out to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Michael, how about you?
Yeah, I switched gears this week. I actually am in the middle of a poetry collection. So I am reading The Stars Crawl Out from Their Caves. It's a poetry collection by Tracy May Adair, and she's actually one of my readers. I wrote a book called Indie Poet Rockstar, which is geared toward helping poets, and she's one of my readers, and I have a private Facebook community, and she'd mentioned her books, and I looked up and thought it was really cool. So they're poems of place, like of experience. So she's traveled a lot in her life, so the poems are very lucid, they're very imaginative. And I also read some of her poems on Wattpad, which were pretty cool too. So I needed something light this week because I'm launching a YouTube channel next week, so that is consuming my life right now. So I wanted to get something read this week, so that was my week.
Okay. So I started my week with Lee Child's the 20th entry in the Jack Reacher series. It's called Make Me.
Wow.
And yeah, and if you've read the first book in the series, you've probably read the other 19. In fact, I guarantee you have, because they're all pretty much the same. They're definitely beach reads. So after the last 2, which were frankly like extremely disappointing, the endings, and it wasn't just a case of, like I said, I've already read like 17 of these, so 18 and 19 got boring. They were interesting up to the end, and then if you are a Jack Reacher fan, I'm going to assume you've already read these books, and if you're not, that you probably won't. So at the end of, it was either the last or the second last book before this one, he spends the entire book just trying to find the antagonists, the two guys, basically. He doesn't know it's 2 guys, but who are clearly running things in the background. And he shows up where they are, and in the building across the street, they take their own lives, and he never gets to meet them. He never interacts with them at all throughout the book. It's just he kind of takes down their network on his way there. Just a really extreme, just disappointing ending. And the other one was kind of the same. But I had heard, so I was thinking I probably wouldn't pick this one up, but my wife loves Jack Reacher, and she was guaranteed to read it, so it was here, and I decided to give it a try. It's definitely better. Um, the ending is a lot more satisfying. But I'm starting to see some other problems in this series too, where this one really stood out for me, where every single character in the book talks like Jack Reacher. They all have the exact same style of dialogue, the kind of smart aleck. I can forgive the love interest in this story because she's ex-FBI, so she's got some of the same. He's a military police officer, so they've got some of the same kind of training, and they would have the same vocabulary maybe. But I mean, it's from the lowly pig farmer all the way up to like everybody in this book talks the same way, which is extremely annoying. Jack is always as a cipher. He's just kind of a blank slate. You always know he's going to do the right thing. These are truly brainless beach reads. And this one was better than the last two. And you were talking about research, John. Like I honestly kind of wonder how much of the stuff he talks about, especially when it comes to guns, is accurate. That you would pick this gun because it weighs a little bit less and the bullets would move faster. I don't know. But he clearly does a ton of research too. Either that or he's just pulling it all out of his butt and it sounds good. I have no idea which. The other thing that's weird with these books, so have you guys read any Jack Reacher?
I haven't.
I read the first one.
I read most of the first one.
Okay.
I read the first one.
So with this one specifically, there's never a point of no return in this book. Like, there's no reason for him to care about anything that's going on. He gets swept up in these events purely by accident, which is usually the case. And there's never a point in the book where he couldn't just say, screw this, I'm out of here. There's no reason for him not to just leave. So it's kind of weird. He's just kind of along for the ride. So it sounds like I hated it, but I didn't. It's the kind of book you would definitely take on a trip. If you're going to be on a flight for a couple hours and you want something brainless and fun to read, this is definitely the kind of thing that you'd want to pick. Let's see. I also finished or got caught up, at least as far as they've gone. I read Saga Volume 5. And Jeff, have you read that series at all? It's a graphic novel.
With the name of it. I haven't read them myself. With graphic novels, I'm pretty much just a Batman fan.
Okay. So Volume 5 starts to get pretty wonky. Introduction of a lot of new characters. Some of them don't last very long. So Volume 5 definitely wasn't the best of the group, but it's still a fantastic series. I really want to sort of find out where they go from here, and I think it's probably going to be at least another year before we get another volume like this. So I just got lucky that there was 5 that I could pick up all at once and sort of dive into the series, and now I'm caught up and I have to wait. But that's okay because I've got the Walking Dead Compendium number 3 to read over Christmas holidays, and that thing has got to be like 1,500 pages or something ridiculous. And the last book I read was one that I talked about briefly last week when we were talking about the news, and that's this I Am Jazz, which I got from the library. So this is a book we mentioned last week where a Florida school wanted to read it to the children in class. It's a book about a child with a girl's brain and a boy's body, is the easiest way to describe it. And actually, I didn't know this before I read it, but the author is actually a transgender youth. She's like 13. She's been on Oprah. She's like got a like a society or a charity kind of thing where they raise money to help other children like her, and so she wrote the book and somebody else illustrated it. Anyway, I wanted to check it out because this school, they sent a letter home to the parents saying we're going to read this. We want to read this book to the children because we have a child like this in the classroom, and they got a letter the next day from some lawyer threatening to sue because of all the terrible things that are in this book and whatever. So I wanted to read it as a parent. There's really nothing in here that's terrible or I kind of question if any of the parents that don't want this read to their kids have picked it up and read it themselves. There's nothing weird in here. I would have no problem at all with, my kids are a lot older now, but if they were in that 2, 3 years older, I wouldn't have any problem with somebody reading this book to them. It's a cute little book, tells a good story. There's I think, a good message. And if you want to see the best and worst of humanity, you should probably go read the reviews, because this is the kind of book that people like to get divided over. Obviously, the reviews are pretty. Some of them are pretty hard to read, but anyway, I liked it, and I would have no problem with anybody, with my kids being, introduced to this book or the topic at that age. That's my weekend reading. So now we can move on, and we'll circle back to Jeff and talk about a few things. So first of all, you have written a book called The Spark.
That's right.
And that came out, I think, late last year or early this year?
Digitally, it came out last fall, and this past summer I saw the paperback release.
Okay, and that was that through like CreateSpace?
Yeah, I went through CreateSpace there. Really like the system format there.
Okay, and so can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Sure. It's essentially a sci-fi epic. It's character-driven. It chronicles the downfall of 200 years of peace brought about by radical ideologies. It also explores some themes of classes, high society, low society, as well as bigotry and prejudice. There's a group of people who develop an attunement with the natural world, which in the Sparks verse, they're called kinetics. So you've got people who can control fire, earth, water, basically the natural elements of the world, but they're highly looked down upon, and that bigotry actually led to a big war 200 years prior, which is deemed the Great War in terms of the book, and society's sort of moved forward to the present, and it's kind of been at a standstill, and it's told through the perspective of 7 different characters from all different walks of life within this world. I'm a really big fan of perspective-driven stories. I find it's a great way of exploring the world, as well as getting a chance to see how the effect or the impact of one character's events will impact a different character's storyline.
Okay. And is that I know right now it's a standalone, but is it going to be a series?
It is going to be a series. Right now I'm in the midst of writing the sequel, which picks up exactly where the first book ends. First book does end on a cliffhanger. I know some people either love it or hate it. I'm a big fan of cliffhanger endings myself. So book 2, you would be able to read it as a standalone when it comes out, but it's really intended to be read one after another. Hopefully it's going to be a trilogy, but due to the restrictions on CreateSpace, I may have to extend it to a 4th book if I can't fit everything into the 3rd book nicely.
What's going on with that? I don't understand with CreateSpace.
Well, essentially, actually, with the Spark, I actually had to cut 2 whole chapters and cut a whole bunch of extra, I guess you could call it fluff, out of chapters in order to keep my page count for my trim size. I think I'm only allowed a maximum of 610 pages for my trim size, so my story was actually quite a bit longer than that. So in order to get the print done, I had to cut it down.
Your book 1 is 600 pages? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love phone books for fantasy novels.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
And George R.R. Martin, it would have taken him 15 years to write that much.
Oh, yeah. Don't get me going on George.
So did you? So when you made those edits for the print version, did those edits make it into then like the digital, or is it sort of?
Yeah, I was working on the print edition at the same time as the digital one. It just took me a little bit longer to do the formatting of the print version because of all the gutters and all that. It was a little bit more difficult to get the text and formatting to line up properly on the interior pages for the print. So essentially what I did is I took my manuscript and uploaded it into CreateSpace initially, and that's when I got that warning saying, your book's too long. So then I did all the trimming that I could. Then I released I started working on the formatting, like chapter headers and all that. Realized it was going to take a lot longer than I really wanted to because I had already been sitting on this story for, I think by this point it was almost 3.5 years now. And so I really wanted to get it out because I had a lot of people, when's it coming out, when's it coming out? So I went forward with a digital release, and while then working on the rest of the formatting.
Okay. So this is obviously fantasy, and so who are your favorite fantasy authors or just authors in general?
Well, funnily enough, George Martin is actually one of my all-time favorite fantasy writers. I just really feel that in his most recent book, we really lost sight of where he was going with his series. But that could be a whole hour's conversation right there. Tolkien is another favorite. When I was in elementary school, me and my buddies, we were really big into the Redwall series by Brian Jakes. Yeah, and yeah, I've tried reading some other fantasy along the way, like R.A. Salvador with the Forgotten Realms. Enjoyed his work, but I found a lot of redundancy in some of his turns of phrase, especially when someone's getting stabbed and their blood's pouring everywhere. It's uses the same sentence over and over again to explain the same thing. So kind of stopped reading his work after I kind of clued into that redundancy.
Have you read any L.E. Modesta Jr.?
I've never even heard of that individual.
Oh, just write down the word imager, and it's and that's like a really good book. It's by L.E. Modesta Jr. He's the Dean Koontz of fantasy. He's got a gazillion books, and they're all awesome. I love them all.
And that's an author that I am aware of but haven't read. So what did you say, Imager?
Yeah, there's a book called Imager. It's the first in the series. Ridiculously interesting magic system. I won't get into it because this is not about him, but just really cool. The other book that you could possibly read is The Magic of Recluse. That's the first book in his biggest seller, his biggest series. But I like Imager more, actually. So.
And again, with the fantasy, I was asking you before the show about this thing called Amethyst Hobbies, because I think that looks like it's kind of deals with fantasy a lot too, right?
Yeah, it's actually a really kind of a fun little hobby or side project I do on top of the writing. It's scale modeling and painting for games like Warhammer, if people are familiar with that. Another game system, Privateer Press. So basically on the side, I do paint for hire services. I've kind of dabbled in some video tutorials. I don't have the right equipment for it, so I kind of stopped doing that, but it's something I like to do to fill in my spare time when I'm not writing or if I've hit a brick wall in terms of plot.
So people who play these games but don't have the time or the ability to sort of paint these expensive... and for anyone who doesn't know, we live in the same city. So I'm sure you've been in Imperial Hobbies,
Yeah.
and I've been in there mostly for like card games and some board games and stuff. Man, those little figures are expensive.
So yeah, absolutely.
So I guess some people probably lay out the money for the figures, and then they don't, like I said, have maybe the knowledge or the time to paint
it's really
them.
interesting when it comes down to people in the painting side of the hobby. You get some people who they want the game. They don't want to deal with painting or gluing models together. They just kind of want to get stuck into the actual strategy of the game. But they also want to have that nicely looking painted army on the table so that all their friends can go, ooh, ah.
I used to love it. I used to love painting the figures, and I always wanted to play the game, but I didn't have any friends to play it. So I had all these figures, and there was no way I could play the game. And now I'm a grown-up with a job, and I'm writing and reading and doing all these things. I got money, and I got no time to play the game.
Yeah.
Sucks.
I've always been the same way, though. I really take more joy in the painting side of it. It's just another creative outlet. Just don't really have the time or, like you said, friends to play the game with. Trying to convert my son, though. I mean, he's only 6.5, so...
You and Patrick are in the same city. You could, play together. You have a tiny little barn.
Play together.
Oh, and they do that. They the libraries. I mean, I'm sure they do this everywhere, but the libraries here are always hosting tournaments. And the store that I mentioned, Imperial Hobbies, they've got a room in the back where people go in and they set up. I've seen the tables at the libraries with the Kind of like you'd imagine like a giant train set, but there's no train, like with the mountains and the they
Oh,
bring in these things and they're just huge.
oh, it's amazing some of the things that people have created. There's a whole host of different forms out there, and some people, it's a whole art form in itself. And you just look at it and you're just in awe of what they've created with nothing but, pink foam from Home Hardware and a little bit of paint.
Hmm. So outside of fantasy and aside from Dickens, are there any other sort of authors that you
Yeah,
gravitate towards?
I really like, well, I used to like Tom Clancy a lot. I've had a hard time getting back into him, but I used to read Rainbow Six all the time. Couldn't really get into his other work. But it's kind of funny. Those seem to be the most authors I read. I seem to gravitate back into their works. George Martin, for instance, I used to annually read the Ice and Fire series. Every winter, pick up book one and start the whole series over again.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Dedication.
it really was. I found that there was a lot of relatability with some of the characters. That's really fallen off now with this most recent book. I've read it once and haven't been able to pick it up again. I've tried getting into Peter F. Hamilton because I've been really itching to find a really good sci-fi opera series. Perhaps I picked up the wrong book, but I cannot get into his style of writing. It's multi-character, which I love, but it's just so incoherent. It's kind of all over the place, and character motivations change for absolutely no discernible reason. And
So, some space opera. Have you read James S. A. Corey at all? The
Leviathan
Expanse?
Wakes. Yeah,
Yep.
I just actually, I think it was about last month I finished reading the first book.
Okay.
I enjoyed it. I don't know if I'd put it quite up there where all the praise is right now. I think I need to read the second book to get a real good feel for where the series is going.
Mm-hmm.
I felt it was going in, there'd be times where the dialogue or the scenes were being described in a way of storytelling that I really enjoy, like that really thick, dense Martin or Tolkien style, but then it would just kind of abruptly stop. And then after finding out that, these guys were interns or assistants for George Martin, and on the front of the cover, you got that big quote from George Martin on the front saying, "Oh, it's a kick-ass sci-fi opera." It kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It's like, well, you guys work for him. Of course he's going to say something nice about your book.
Yeah, I really have a hard time with author quotes these days because I was just looking at reviews for a book today, and I won't name names, but so I was looking at an author's books, and lots of quotes from a pretty well-known author out there. Well, they do a podcast together, so of course the one guy's gonna rave about the other guy's books, and so I.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Jeff, if you like, or if you're looking for space opera, you should check out Ian and Banks' Culture series.
Okay, I'll keep that.
That's pretty cool. I read the first book in that, and I really enjoyed it. That might be something you're into because it's kind of dense. There's a lot of characters, and
perfect.
Yeah, might be up your alley. If you're looking, it's like the series that invented space opera. Go ahead, John.
Fantastic.
Sorry, I interrupted. After you read that, after that, you got to read Midshipman's Hope by David Feintuch.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the best space opera that I've ever read, other than maybe Dune, which was great. But you gotta like first-person narrative though. If you don't like that, you're not gonna like it.
I'm kind of indifferent towards the first person. I've read a few that have been done really, really well, but then there's other ones where it's just, it's not. I'm not feeling it. I have I don't know if he's writing anymore, but actually the fellow guy who got me started into writing novels, because I used to just write abstract prose and poetry. His third book, he started doing the first-person narrative, and I felt that he really found his stride with it. It was still areas that needed to be worked on, but when he was in the zone with it, it was really, really well done, and I could really connect with the character. It's just everything that can enwrapped
awesome.
it. So
I love first person. It's a really, because I don't like, I know that you sort of jump into different characters and stuff, based on some of the books that you had mentioned. First person doesn't do that. You're stuck kind of in one viewpoint, and that's the trick. It's like the third rail. You don't want to touch that rail. It's like you're walking right along it, barely not touching it, and it's a hard writing style to master.
Oh, absolutely, I'd agree with
Yeah,
that.
I don't mind first or third person. It's the second person that kills me. Point of view. Like you go to the grocery store, you buy some lettuce, you know.
Yeah,
But has anybody
absolutely.
actually written anything like that you've read recently?
What do you mean, like written?
Well, yeah, because I don't think. I mean, I'm sure it's out there, but I doubt any of us have read any of it, right? Because it's
Yeah.
literary, you know.
Well, it's like choose your own adventures or second person.
Yeah.
I've read some
Okay, but
narrative
that would
nonfiction
make
that's
sense, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
for a
yeah,
choose
Jedi
your own
read all
adventure,
that,
sure. When you
yeah.
roll the dice and like that's what you need to incorporate with your decision select stuff, where they don't just get the book. Because I remember those books when I was a kid, where you didn't just have the book; you had a piece of paper with your character sheet,
Yeah,
and you had to roll the
you write them
dice.
all down. Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, I've read some short stories that were in second person that did okay, and I think that's because that point of view, you really can only get away with it if it's for a very short period of time. I just can't imagine reading an entire novel in the second person, because
Yeah.
like it's not me. Like I'm not doing
Yeah,
any of that.
it would be a tough one where people could get turned off because you'd be like, "Well, I would never do that." So no, I didn't do
Right.
like when you're living in the head or writing above the shoulder
Right.
of a character, they can do anything, and as long as it fits within the confines of the story, it won't be questioned, right? But
Yeah. Well, and there's no character development. I mean, how
Yeah.
can you develop a character in the second person? I think that's why I like the first and third so much. But
okay, let's see. Do we have any questions for Jeff?
I did see something pop up about offering the ebook for free, so get some reviews. I do that intermittently. Actually, when I first released the digital version, released it. I think it was for whatever the maximum KDP, which is a Kindle Direct Publishing maximum free day allowance was. So it's just something I do every so often. My advice would be just check out my Facebook page to see when I'm going to do one next.
So what is the best way for people to get a hold of you online? Whether it's
I
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the best way would be social media there with the facebook.com/books by Howell. That's everything that's going to be related to my writing, all my appearances, or where you can pick up physical copies of my book if you're local to London, and any sort of free promotions I'll be doing with the Kindle Direct. Over Black Friday, I offered a discount code for the paperback through CreateSpace, so that's the best place if you want to keep in touch or follow me, is through that website.
And the website is Books by Howell.
Yeah, on
Okay.
Facebook there.
Oh, it's a Facebook page?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. We'll check
Absolutely.
that out. So we do not have a topic for next week yet, but so I have to tune in and find out what that is. And thanks for coming, Jeff. It was nice
Thanks
talking
for
to you.
having me.
Best of luck with the Spark, and
thank you.
let us know when the next one's out.
Oh, absolutely.
And you guys all have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
see you next week, guys.
Have a good one.